Welcome back to another episode of the Shawn and Anthony show. He just wanted to show you his pecs real quick.
Yes.
And today we thought we'd talk about the importance of travel. So Anthony, what sparked this for you?
I think because we're coming into summertime,
Right.
and this is when people start making decisions or hopefully they've already made their decisions to where they're going to be going for a holiday break for summertime. But the reason I wanted to talk about this topic was why it came up to me was that travel is such a wonderful opportunity for us to explore new places, obviously,
Right.
New cultures, and to take us out of our comfort zones. But what I observe, especially in social media, is that I watch a lot of people who travel, but they go to the same place every year.
So when you brought up the importance of travel, which you hear a lot of people talk about, and typically people that travel a lot value travel over people who don't
travel, right?
Travel a lot. But I often ask myself the question, like, are you really traveling in the sense that are you going on the package tour?
Right.
Or are you going on the adventure?
Right.
The planner.
Right.
Like, we've got to do this, and this. And are you really getting the benefit of travel when you do that? And I have an example for me personally. Lived in Korea for a little while. You lived in Thailand. And I did some of the prearranged package stuff, but the most memorable aspects of that time in Korea were when I got lost. And my God, I was so scared because in Asia is like going to another planet, right? Because in Europe, I can kind of make out the language a little bit.
Right.
I couldn't, the symbols, the Hangul, like I was an alien on another planet, and getting lost was really scary. Like, oh, am I gonna get back? But that's where I really immersed myself in this very different, very beautiful, secular culture. And that's where I learned some things about myself. So I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, no, I think that's why I think travel is so important. And I think one of the great things I did read recently is that Americans now, there's like, it used to be only like 10%, only a few years ago, only 10% of Americans held passports.
Really?
It was so ridiculously low. But I think with the whole social media and the travel bloggers and all that thing, it's opened up a whole new world for people, and especially for young people, I think, to go out there and to explore. But the reason I wanted to bring this back up was with the travel thing, like I was saying, I watch a lot of people who will go to repeatedly the same places over and over and over. And I understand that people have a great time somewhere and they want to go relive the experience. But I often question that because that is not true. You're basically moving from one environment to the of comfortability to another of your home to another environment where you feel comfortable.
Sure.
And travel, I believe that travel should be about, like you said, it's about the adventure, and it's about the unexpected that's going to happen. Because it's the unexpected, it's that wrong turn that you make down that alley that all of a sudden you walk into a world that you had no fucking idea existed. And all of a sudden you are now lost, and you keep getting further and further lost. And when you emerge out of it, whoa, the enrichment that you have gained is so beyond compare.
Well, let's talk about this relative to us, because I think you and I have an appreciation for that. Like when I went to Puerto Rico for the first time, the first thing I was young, I was 20, 21, 20, something like that. The first thing I did was find the Puerto Rican bartender, developed a relationship. I'm not going to go into details. We had a good time.
Okay, just because you said that already clarifies.
But I wanted to find somebody who I could get close with.
Was it a male or a female?
At the time, it was a male.
Okay.
And I was engaged to be married. So this is very controversial.
Okay. But you didn't get married, it's okay, we're
I
good.
was a runaway bride, but not yet by that time. Anyway, I was young. Quit judging me. But we discovered like real Puerto Rico, like
Right.
down in dirty Puerto Rico, and I loved it. And I seek that out. I feel like I'm trapped in a cage if I travel with somebody who's got an agenda.
Right.
And I know that there are people that appreciate that, so I don't want to judge that. But for me, the value is in the adventure. Like I wanna get, like you said, get lost. I want to get lost.
Yeah, and Shawn, I'll give you my first my growing experience with that. So for years I traveled with my company, and I would travel all over the world, and it was always 5-star. It was always the best of the best, and staying in the finest of hotels, and blah blah blah. And listen, no complaints.
Right.
It was a wonderful, wonderful life.
Right.
But what happened for me was, after my, I don't know, 8th trip to Thailand, because I was working with a factory over there, so I have to go up there often. For my 8th trip to Thailand, and I was again put up at the Peninsula Hotel, which is, the peninsula. It's the peninsula.
Right.
And one day I walked downstairs, and because what would happen is that I would get to the hotel, and basically they would send a car for me to come and pick me up, escort me, take me to the factory. I'd be at the factory, and then I'd get in the car and come back to the hotel. That was my life for however many weeks I would be there. And it was boring. And one day I walked down into the lobby, and I'll never forget this. Do you remember the guy from Jerry Seinfeld, Kramer?
Yeah.
I walked in the lobby, and he was standing in the lobby. And I got all like kind of proclaimed or whatever. And I walked up to him and I said, "Oh my God," I said, "it's such a pleasure to meet you." And we started a little bit of a chit chat. And I said, "So what do you do? What do you do while you're here?" He said, "I go off and just do whatever the fuck I want." And it kind of struck a spark in me. And I thought, this is what I need to do. Granted, I'm staying in a lovely hotel, but I don't know what exists outside of this hotel. So that day I went for a walk. Now I was told by everybody that was protecting me, because you have like protectors.
You're going to get, you might be mugged.
You might be mugged, they're going to kidnap you, blah, blah, blah.
Which is all very possible.
Right, it's a possibility,
Right.
right? But I thought, I'm just going to go for a walk. And I went out and I just went walking. And I remember just exploring and finding, first up, it wasn't scary, number one. Number two, it was amazing because there was so much going on that wasn't pretty.
I have something to say to that.
Okay.
Like, I've done this since I was a little girl, but I kind of raised myself, and I had an overdeveloped sense of confidence, if you will, probably overdeveloped, because I'm the crazy white girl that wanted to go into Southeast and just hang out. And it was, I mean, when I look back, I'm like, yeah, I could have been raped,
Right.
mugged, what have you. But I like to live for that.
Not for it to happen.
No, I don't condone
Right.
this.
But
I didn't get mugged till I went till New York City anyway.
oh my God, I got mugged in New York City too. In
We're just
42nd
meant to
Street,
be.
Times Square, before they cleaned it up and made it Disneyland. Times Square was like back in the 80s. If you went to Times Square, you were walking into uncharted territory. It was like the dingiest, the seediest. It was full of prostitution and sex shops and sex theaters and drugs everywhere. And I got mugged for $700, I think.
$700.
Yeah, all the money that I had,
Wow.
but I was a stupid white kid walking down, and the money was sticking out of my pocket. Like, how fucking stupid, but I learned a lesson. Anyway, back to the travel
Well,
thing.
no, you like seedy stuff, so cut to Thailand.
Cut
and
to when
you're-
I was actually performing on 42nd Street
that,
at a strip
or
club.
hanging out in junkyards. And people are like, what are you doing? Didn't some of the people around you like separate themselves
Oh
from you? And
yeah,
you're like, what are you doing?
Yeah, so-
Junkyards.
yeah. So it's interesting. So the travel, like you said, I want to go back to what you were saying about.
Okay.
Some people travel very differently. Some people travel with a very scripted agenda. And my partner travels that way. He loves to go in tour groups. He loves to go on the excursions with all the people and do the all-inclusive hotel where all the meals are prepared in the bar tab and all that stuff. And it is so not me. I have learned to accommodate it, and I will go and have a good time.
Right.
now because we want to spend time together. But at the end of the day, that is so not how I can travel. I don't want to live that way. I want to travel and I want to walk out the door and go experience.
Well, yeah, and it gives you different ways of looking at the world, because when you do these tour groups, I mean, these things are set up to be they're trying to Americanize it.
Oh,
What
totally.
are the Americans like, including how difficult it was to get real authentic Korean food? Like, oh, you can't handle the heat.
Oh, right, exactly.
Right? Like I had to beg for the heat, the hot food.
Right.
And that's why, I don't know, as a creator, has that been invaluable for you? Because I don't think you going on the package tours would lend itself to what comes out of this.
Well, it's like you said, I like the idea of never knowing what's going to happen. And the unexpected is always the most memorable.
Right.
The getting lost in the adventure of allowing yourself to have the freedom to make mistakes that's just a generalized.
Like, rather than take the paved road, you actually want to make the road.
Right, like if I'm gonna look at the boulevard and there's gonna be Saks and Prada and Gucci and all those stores down that boulevard, which is beautiful, I'm gonna look at it and go, done that, been there. It's gonna be the same thing that I would have seen in America on the same basically idealized street. I'm gonna take this street over here and see where that takes me. And that side street is gonna take me to a whole new enriching experience.
Yeah, and I think it makes life more, I'm not going to say it makes you more interesting than the person that doesn't do that.
Yeah,
for me, I'm trying to keep this about me and not judgment. So for me, it makes life more interesting.
Right.
Like, because I've said this before, like I'd rather die than lead a boring life.
Right.
And when I just getting caught up in the monotony, my thinking gets stale. Everything about my life becomes stale when I allow myself to do that. So like, I just need to shake it up. And I do that by going into these uncomfortable situations.
Well, Shawn, I mean, you can break that down to even just the simplest of things. Like if you even going to the grocery store or going out to eat dinner, if you go to the same place over and over, you're going to have the same choices, the same experience. Like a grocery store, I love going to the Asian market. I love going to the halal market or whatever market that's out there that is not the typical Americanized version of a supermarket.
Yeah.
Because and I don't give myself the option of going, oh, you know what, I'm going to go to the other store. I'm going to put myself in that situation to kind of figure out something new. And what happens is that your taste experiences grow. You try things that you go, oh my God, that was so amazing. Or you try things and go, oh, what did I just do? But
Right.
That's part of the joy of it. Or if you go to the same restaurant all the time, because that's my favorite restaurant and I'm going to go there all the time. And that's what you're going to get. And you get the same thing all the time.
That's what I loved about, did you ever watch Anthony Bourdain, Parts Unknown?
Oh yeah.
I loved Parts Unknown.
Yes.
Yeah.
Parts Unknown. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the the importance of travel. First off, I think I wanted to get back to the importance of travel. The importance of travel is that what it does is it expands our perspective of the world. I believe that travel also helps us in understanding that we are not all that. That just because and Americans, we have a way of like thinking that we are the best of the best of the best. And the reality is that every culture is so unique and different. And I love going into cultures where I'm not in control, where I have to accommodate their culture if I want to survive in it.
Right.
I'm not one to go into culture and go, but they don't speak English. I don't want to be here. Like they don't understand me. And people will say that. I don't
understand that.
Right.
Americans will go demand, not only do they demand that everybody speaks English here, but they'll go into
They'll go to another country and go, but they don't speak English. Like, yeah, it's
you don't speak Hangul. What's wrong with you?
right. So,
But there's a neuroscientist that actually talks about the importance of travel in the sense that it broadens your perspective. It actually gives you different categories for looking at the same thing. So you broaden your horizons, basically,
Right.
and you start to see things in new light. And maybe if you're trying to solve a problem, you can't solve it through the lens of the American mind. And so stepping into a different culture and seeing that problem from a different angle or a creative project allows you to tackle it in a new way. And I think that's fascinating because we all look at the world very differently and none of it's right or wrong. It's just different.
Right. I remember when I was like 18 or 19 years old, and it was my first trip out of my little hometown. It was to New York. And I remember being so scared on that first trip because imagination and what I had seen on television about New York was what you saw like in detective crime show dramas or movies, and it was scary as shit, right?
Yeah.
So I was going for the first time, and I was going for some modeling thing that I was doing, and they would put us all up at the Waldorf Astoria, so it was a nice hotel. And of course they said, don't go anywhere without your escorts, blah, 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 whatever. But I remember one night I snuck out. It was like the first time doing this. I snuck it on my own, and I ended up in an alley where there were like bonfires and there were homeless people,
Right.
and there were like ghetto blasters going on. And I remember just being so scared, but also so fascinated that the world that I had lived in for so long, which was so, I hate to, I mean, I'm going to say it, it's very white. I grew up in a little tiny town in Northern California, and it was very white. I think we had one black family in our entire town the whole time I grew up.
That would make me uncomfortable because I grew up in DC, which is very diverse.
Diverse,
Yeah.
right. So my experience of going to New York for the first time, and I remember what an impact that had on me, because when I came back to my little hometown, I would try to explain to my friends, oh my God, it was so amazing, whatever. And they would just kind of look at me like I had three heads. Like, why would you want to be in that situation? But it was that was my initial push out the door. And from that point on, I knew that my life was going to have to be a life that included traveling all over the world.
But also, what about this? Because we do romanticize, people tend to romanticize cultures outside of their own. So you do have people that romanticize, believe it or not, American culture.
Right.
And their idea of it, which is often derived from the movies and the television they're watching.
Right.
and the stereotypes of that culture. But what about going deeper into because a lot of people have this desire to get out of where they are, which is good. I think it's important. But how often do we kind of take for granted everything that is right here? And how often do we fail to go deeply into where we are?
Well, that's a very good point. And I think that you're absolutely right. I think that we can romanticize being in exotic places.
The grass is greener.
Yes, it's going to be.
I mean, India. In the spiritual, India, and today it's still that way. We look at it. There's a great documentary I wanted to tell you about. It's called Kumari.
Okay.
And they play on that concept of the romanticism and the guru-itis. And this guy, please go see this documentary. This guy he's from India. He grew up in New York. He actually has a New York accent, but he puts on the fake Indian accent, gets the robes and the beads, and he becomes a fake guru. And you watch these people flock to him.
Wow.
And they go live with him and commune with him. And at the end, he breaks the news. So watch the documentary, and it's amazing. And the lesson's not to judge. He's like, no, guys, you are your own guru.
Right, right.
It was never me.
Right.
I'm not even real.
Right. I love that. That's awesome.
But I was talking about the romanticizing of the other cultures. And I find the value in visiting all these cultures, especially ones that we judge negatively sometimes, you just learn that they're human.
Right.
They're human beings
that are trying to survive.
That are trying to survive, that need to put a roof over their family. They have dysfunctional relationships like all of us.
Yeah.
They might do things in a different way, but we all have very similar human experiences.
Right.
And I think that's valuable because there's no othering at that point. It's like, no, we're all the fucking same. We're all making this shit up.
Right.
As we go.
I think one of the things too about traveling is that you have to, I had to learn for myself, is that when you're in a foreign land, and especially like, we've been in Asia and some crazy places, that you have to hang up your Americanized
the independence.
That the
Because
independence.
in Asia, it's very communal.
It's very communal. So you have to hang that up. I had to learn. I had a great teacher when I moved to Asia who basically spent a year with me to teach me how to behave in Asian society or Asian culture.
Right.
So that was very helpful. But I think we have to hang up our hats because you don't do certain things in certain cultures that we do in America.
Crossing our legs.
Yeah, like crossing your legs, showing the bottom of your feet.
Yeah.
There are certain things you don't do, but also you don't argue, you don't get into debates with people. You accept what people give you. You never say no when somebody invites you somewhere. You have to follow the protocol because if you don't, you just look like a stupid American, basically, and you're considered as being very rude. So the importance of travel, and I've been fortunate that.
So you had to get over yourself.
You have to get over yourself. I was fortunate to be able to travel with my other company, my company that I had, because I have to be honest, it was lovely because it was all very luxurious.
Mm-hmm.
What I regret about my travel experiences is that that's what 90% of it was. I wish that I would have started traveling when I was much younger. I didn't start really traveling the world until I was in my late 30s, and that was all for business. But I tell young people today, if you have the opportunity to put on a backpack and travel to a foreign country and live in a hostel and sleep in a tent and do all those things, those experiences and lessons will become so invaluable because number one, you're there with the same kind of people that are looking for the same experience, but also you can do that shit when you're young. You can sleep on the floor.
Mothers are like gripping their chairs right now
Right.
because that asshole is encouraging my baby to go sleep in a dangerous hostel
Right.
that they made like a horror movie about called Hostel. You're a bad influence.
True.
But I agree with you.
But
100%.
you have to, I think you have to do that. So anyway, back to what I was originally.
I want to say something
Oh,
because
sorry.
you talk about the money and they go into the best of the best, which is nice. Like I'm not going to pretend like, oh, that isn't nice. Like keep those lovely hotels away from me. But I think it's important to experience like third world countries.
Absolutely.
You know, every day I hear people bitching about, and when I say this, it's not a judgment, but like we forget how good we have it. Just like being poor in America, not that it's great. Look, I've been poor, so I'm not judging the poor, but being poor in America is a luxury compared to what you can get somewhere else. And some of the things that we complain about, what I'm saying is travel has made me appreciate more of the simple stuff.
Right.
Like we're on a computer right now recording ourselves and delivering a message to the world. Like this is a luxury, right? And some of the stuff that we complain about just doesn't matter.
Right. Well, can I tell a little story real quick?
Yeah.
It'll be really short. So I was living in Bangkok, and I'm looking at which camera am I looking at? I was living in Bangkok, and I had this beautiful. I now moved to Asia, and I had this beautiful penthouse, and life was wonderful. And to be honest with you, the place was so big and I was by myself that I honestly didn't see 80% of it because there was no need for it. But I wanted to live large, right? One day I'm walking down the street and I passed by a young man with a backpack and we met eyes. And I think it was probably an attraction that made us lock eyes,
right?
But passed each other on the street. And about 10 minutes later, he is sitting next to me in a little restaurant that I was sitting at. And he introduced himself and he was from Greece. He was a young kid from Greece. It's like probably in 22, 23 years old. And so we started chatting and he was lovely. And I thought, wow, he had just gotten there. He was traveling, he was backpacking, something that he did every year. And so I said to him, I said, you know what? I have this huge place. I said, don't get a hotel. Come and stay with me. I said, come and stay with me. You can have your own room and you can do whatever you want, but come and stay with me. So of course he was like, great, absolutely wonderful. What a great opportunity. So he moves his little backpack in and I don't know, he's there for like a week or so. And one day I'm taking him out every day. I'm taking him to dinner. I'm doing all the things that I do, right? And one day he says to me, he says, Anthony, he said, why is everything that we do so fancy? And I said, What do you mean? He said, everywhere we go, it's so expensive. And he goes, and you pay for everything and this big place you live in. He goes, why is it all so fancy? And I was like, that's
what we
that's
do.
my life, right? And he said to me this. He said, I'm going to take you. He goes, if you're willing, I'm going to show you my life. He said, but you have to agree. And I love people that are this ballsy. He said, you have to agree. And this is what he said. He said, he was gonna pack me a backpack. And I could only have $12,
Yes.
and that we were going to go live in a hostel on this place, in this place called Kosan Road, where
Okay.
the backpackers would converge.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I stuck a credit card in my boot and, whatever to prepare myself. But anyway, I agreed. And for the next 3 days, I went and stayed with this kid in a hostel where there was a single fan in the ceiling. There was a shared toilet down the hall. There was a shared shower. There was no television. And it was the most life-changing experience that I've ever had. And when I say life-changing for the best. Because I spent 3 days as a 40-something-year-old man with hundreds of young people who were backpacking around the world, and they were all converged in Thailand to go wherever they were going to go. And I had no choice because I had made this agreement to sit there and immerse myself into it. And it was the most beautiful and life-changing experience I've ever had.
Interesting.
I'm so grateful for that little young Demetrius who drugged me down and showed me a whole new world. And I learned something about myself.
What did you
I learned that, and that I think was a part of the beginning of my journey of self-exploration, of going, I don't want to live that life. I don't want to live that life of just being fancy, as Demetrius put it.
Or sheltered.
Or sheltered, or that everything has to be a certain this or that you could just walk down the street and experience new things without it costing you a penny.
Well, that was the life of the Buddha. I mean, he was
Yeah.
sheltered growing up, Siddhartha Gautama, and then he goes off to see with the poor and all the stuff that he was protected from. And that's where his enlightenment
Absolutely.
came from.
So guys, should we wrap this up?
Wrap
Do you have
it up.
anything else to say?
No, I'll probably be back solo next week because you're traveling.
No, we can record Zoom.
If you're up for it, I'll do
Yeah.
it. So why don't you quickly tell them about where you're going?
Ah.
I'll give them more detail next week.
So I'm
and then we'll
traveling
wrap
again,
it up.
as I always seem to be traveling. I'm traveling, but this year I decided that last year we traveled out of the country so much that it kind of really beat me down. This year we decided that we were just going to stay pretty much within the United States. And so this trip, although I lie,
What?
because in the fall we're talking about going to Tibet and to Asia and a couple other places. So anyway, but I digress
Are you
here.
gonna drag your friends into real Tibet, real Asia?
Yeah,
You
no.
should.
Well, I have to. No, we've been invited by somebody. Okay, so I'm not even going to go into it.
Don't go into it.
Okay,
Well,
I can go into
to
it.
be continued.
Just to say that we've been invited, that was probably enough.
Yeah.
To give you an idea of what it's going to be like. But this trip is going to Mount Shasta. We had gone to Mount Shasta last year for a 2-week period, and it was such a enlightening and wonderful experience that we thought we would
He
go
lost
back
all of
again.
his manners.
I just burped coffee.
It's because he's living on the streets now.
We're going to Mount Shasta to just go experience the mountain, because the mountain is such a beautiful, wonderful experience to experience it. Not from just the spirituality side, which is a big part of it, but also it's just beautiful. It's just a beautiful place to be. And so I'm looking forward to that. So we can zoom
Okay,
over
so
there.
we'll talk more next week.
Yeah, but
Thanks
wait,
for
I had a
tuning
point. I was going to wrap this
in.
up.
What is your point?
My point was that, look, you guys, if you're going to travel, don't go to the same place all the time. I had a friend that every year she went to Aruba. Every single year to Aruba, to the same hotel. And I thought, and she asked me to go one day, and I was like, no.
Ew.
Like, that sounds like the worst trip in the world to me, to go to Aruba, to an all-inclusive resort for a week. That just does not sound like a fun trip to me. So
don't go to Aruba again.
don't go to Aruba
Don't
or
go on a
anywhere
cruise
again. Like, you go to Disneyland every year. I mean, people go, but my kids love going to Disneyland. well, you know what? Take your kids somewhere where they're going to actually experience something that is like totally amazing and interesting.
Yeah, just don't get mugged.
Just don't get mugged or get mugged. Talk about a life experience.
We'll see you next week on that note. Thanks for tuning in.